Um, in my last video, I talked about the reasons why I joined the Army and how it was, um, I felt it was a responsibility that I had as a member of my generation to continue to, as a way of honoring those who came before me, and for me to stand on freedom's frontier and support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the freedoms of not just the people of the United States, but all free peoples of the world. That may sound dogmatic or propaganda to you, but it's real. People really do that. We really believe in that. We really do that. It is not something made up. It's not about glory. It's about service. So I felt it was right and correct for me to join the Army and become a soldier. It was also a way for me to provide for my family, coming from the background that I have. Once again, I'll just reiterate a little bit. I come from an underprivileged, what's known as an underprivileged family. We grew up poor, um, and I wasn't afforded much opportunities for growth and development. I basically survived my childhood and experienced a degree of neglect and abuse, and wasn't really set up for success or set up with what I needed to be a successful adult. Had no idea how if I didn't have help, I would not have survived. And I found that through codependent behavior, and that's another story. So 1999, I left for the Army. I went through 13 weeks of one station unit training at Fort Knox, Kentucky, to become a U.S. Army tanker, an M1 Abrams armor crewman. The MOS identifier is 19 kilo, or 19K, kilo being the phonetic alphabet used in the military. It was intense for me. I was really super stressed out for a while, the first few weeks in basic training, because I wasn't used to being treated in such a harsh manner. And it wasn't really harsh, it was just stern. And it's, it's a game. It's really just a game. It's just a game. When I think back about it, and just how just a few days, like going home on leave after basic training and then coming back. I had to come back to Fort Knox, and the drill sergeants were just such different personalities once I graduated. We no longer were playing the game. Um, but I had heard stories from my best friend Daoud Littleton. He is my oldest friend. We go back to middle school, and he had served in the National Guard, um, like almost out of high school. I think he took a GED in basic training. He got his GED in basic training. Was in the went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, Relax in Jackson, as they call it, and then went to his AIT Advanced Individual Training to be in communications at Fort Gordon, Georgia, Fort Gordon, Georgia. And so he would tell me these stories about the drill sergeants and basic training. And my experience of basic training, or my understanding of basic training, was uh, I don't know. It was like I don't had Full Metal Jacket come out. It had come out, actually. So so Full Metal Jacket was like, that's pretty intense. That was pretty. and then whatever stories that that Daoud had told me, which I had just embellished in my own mind to, like, crazy. Like, they're really nothing. Actually, basic training got to be pretty fun. And but what it did for me was it gave me an opportunity to step into an identity, a professional identity. It gave me work with purpose. It gave me order, structure, discipline, and a word that I wouldn't know or term that I would not know for some years later, boundaries. So it gave me also safety. It sounds kind of oxymoronic or contradictory that, oh, you mean a soldier where you're going in war and fighting and the people are trying to kill you, you're trying to kill other people. That's not safe. Well, for me, growing up in an environment where there was no boundaries, and there were no boundaries, and there was chaos, and not just emotional danger, but physical danger, being abused. Um, it was great. It was great for me because I knew where I stood in the structure of all my relationships with my peers and with my subordinate, or excuse me, not my subordinates, but my superiors. So the drill sergeants, they were the authority. We had clear boundaries. The even after leaving basic training, when I went to my first assignment, and they did it in basic training also, what's called a counseling statement, an initial counseling statement. This is a form. It is standard, and what it does is it lays out between yourself and your supervisor the boundaries of your relationship, what your or your responsibilities are, your short-term and long-term goals as far as your development in that job or that assignment, and also their duties and responsibilities in helping you, supporting you to be successful in you performing your duties. I mean, that's beautiful. It's amazing. For the first time in my life, I had clarity about what was expected of me, and I had goals, and I had someone I had mentorship. I didn't have that prior to becoming a soldier. So I watched my parents. I observed my parents, as all children do. I observed the adults in my life, and I can tell you, my childhood, the I couldn't trust the adults. They may have Some of them may have had my best interest in mind, but they certainly didn't live up to. Uh, they didn't give me what I needed. So as a child, I just became very mistrustful of authority figures and of adults because no matter what, I was doomed. And that is an absolute, that's not an opinion. That was my experience. So going into the army, I was given this uniform. I was shown how to wear it. I wore it proudly. I took pride in my appearance. I was uh, shown how to be in order. Like in basic training, for instance, everyone had to have their socks or their clothing items a certain way. Their racks or their beds, their bunks were to be made a specific way. It was standardized across the board. You had actual goals to meet, um, and they were reachable goals. So another thing that I experienced was the experience of accomplishment. I had not experienced accomplishment in my childhood, really. So the army was so good because it gave me reachable goals, and it helped me with my with developing esteem within myself because I didn't have any self esteem, and I still am building my reservoir of self esteem even at this stage in my life because much of my esteem was actually centered around or in regards to my identity as a soldier because that's where I was able to esteem myself. What else? Just it also gave me an opportunity to broaden my horizons, so to speak, because I was able to travel and experience different cultures and even shatter whatever prejudices that came from being an American uh, citizen with a very limited worldview. Now, I've always, not always, but I guess I could say that I have been an open minded individual, but there's just certain things that having grown up in the American culture, I have not been exposed to, and also ideologies which have limited my worldview. And this is important because my worldview shapes my relationships and the way that I experience the world and the way the world experiences me. So, going into other countries and other places in the United States and having these experiences of different language, culture, social interactions, social rules, social paradigms has really allowed me to grow tremendously as a human being. And rather than be closed minded or narrow minded in my worldview, it's allowed me to see things in a more universal way. That is, when I look at people, I don't look at them so much for their nationality or their gender or their sex or their sexuality or their religion or their culture. What I do is I look at them from this perspective of our common humanity. And this is a really big deal because many people in the world aren't able to do that. But one of the ways that helped me develop that perspective, that worldview, is through my experiences as a soldier, as a warrior in the United States Army, traveling to different countries, having gone to Asia, East Asia, and having gone to West Asia, and having gone to Europe, and also different parts of the United States. I was also nurtured in the Army. The Army gave me opportunities for professional development and growth, accomplishment, and gaining responsibilities, being having responsibilities bestowed upon me through being promoted into a higher rank or shifting to different jobs. I've had a very unique career. I'll give you some examples. For one, in the Army, when you go to basic training or you go to your training, they teach you how initial training. It's called initial entry training, or IET, basic training. The other branches of the service, they may call it boot camp or they may call it something else. But in the Army, we call it initial entry training or one station unit training. So, um, conversely, as Daoud, my friend Daoud, as I mentioned before, went to basic training at Fort Jackson, then he went to learn his job skill at another location. I learned all of that in one location, and that was Fort Knox, Kentucky, home of armor. Well, no longer, but it was at the time I went. So I learned how to be a soldier. I learned how to behave as a soldier, to act accordingly. I learned military courtesies and customs. I learned ceremony, drill and ceremony, which is part of being a soldier. Is that we don't walk anywhere, we march, and if there are three or more, we march, and it's kind of neat to me. It's that regimentation, that structure felt really good to my soul because it gave me a sense of safety and predictability. Uh, Also, um, I was taught a job skill. I was trained. I was trained in many things. I was trained not just to fire a weapon, a personal weapon. I had two, three, four personal weapons, actually, when I think about it. I had the M4 carbine. I had the M203, which is an M16 rifle with a grenade launcher underneath. So I was a grenadier for a brief period of time, and then I also carried the M9 Beretta pistol, and then I also carried um, when I was deployed. I also handled the M240. An M240 Bravo was a kit that we got, machine gun, and then also managing the tank as a loader and driver as a gunner. So I learned how to handle these different weapon systems and equipment. I also learned how to operate a radio. I learned how to operate what's called a plugger, which is a GPS and encryption device, ANCD encryption device. I learned how to drive various vehicles. My driver's license, Army driver's license, rated me up to 72 tons. I've driven an M1 Abrams tank, Humvee, an MRAP vehicle. Um, what else? M113 armored personnel carrier. What else? And even a bus. Oh, 5 ton, 6 axle, 10 wheel, 5 ton truck. Um, yeah, pulling a trailer. I mean, and a bus. Like even those large tour buses that they take. Like when music groups, like bands. Like when Van Halen had something like six of those things when they were touring for a while. So I've driven like from that all that those various vehicles, and so I've done that. So they trained me on things, and those all gave me an a sense of accomplishment. Moreover, I also received combat lifesaver training and hazardous materials training, in addition to learning how to operate the tank. And that all of those things gave me a sense of accomplishment and esteemed myself, to give me confidence in doing 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 my job and being a person, feeling good about myself. And as I advanced in rank from being a lower enlisted soldier, from being an E1, or no, I came into the Army as an E2, private, yeah, private E2, and then to first class, and then specialist. And then when I became a sergeant, I became a leader. And as a leader, I had soldiers under me, and I was responsible for two other soldiers in addition to the tank. And that gave me leadership experience. And and it was very, very good for me, because the responsibility and the accountability helped me become more centered and confident in myself and what I can do as a person. And having been very studious, not studious as far as my academic career, that couldn't happen in my environment growing up. I could not succeed as a student in my childhood, but I became very smart. I love to learn. I value education. I always did. I just wasn't able to. I wasn't given the resources necessary for me to achieve academic excellence as a child, well into high school. But after high school and later on, I am academically excellent. I just am. In fact, it's it's been known that been noted by my leadership in the Army that I excel at things that I do. So that wasn't that's one of the things that's just a big deal for someone like me, coming from a traumatized childhood and going into the Army and giving opportunities to grow and excel. And it was very, very good for my mental health. There are a lot of things that the Army doesn't give you, and it's because it's a professional environment, and it's not without its dysfunction. Um, because dysfunction is everywhere and anywhere you'll find a human being. So that's true. But it did give me opportunities for growth and expansion, and broaden my worldview, and allow me to really, really connect to people on a human level. Great deal of empathy for people in all walks of life, from all cultures, wherever we find people. We are all doing the same thing, just our best to make a life for ourselves. Sometimes with lots of resources, sometimes with little resources, but we all have love in our hearts. And some of us may have more barriers to receiving and giving that love than others, based on our backgrounds and our experiences. But we all have that love in our hearts, and if we look to connect to that, we can connect to one another. So the Army gave me a lot. It was a great decision for me. It was not the best decision for my family, but it was the best decision that I can make for me. And it did serve my family, because it afforded me an opportunity to provide a stable wage, a stable salary, or a stable income through a salary, for my family, stability. Also, it gave me health care benefits, a benefits package that was great for my whole family, and also housing benefits and education benefits. And also, there are tax-free entitlements that come with being assigned different assignments. For instance, going to war. I never made so much money as I did when I was deployed to Iraq in 2007 to 2009. For the first time in my life, I made more than my ex-wife. Not that that's a big deal. It's not a big deal. But coming from not having stable income or working retail or not having an education to being able to provide for my family and even have my ex-wife say goodbye to her job and go back to school full time was a big deal for me. I felt good being a provider for my family, and I was able to. It was an expression of healthy masculinity for me. And I'll talk about that kind of thing later on in another video. But the army was very good for my mental health, and I made some very. I met some. Excuse me. Met some very fine people in the army, both military and civilian alike. I've worked with some of the finest human beings who walk this earth. Some of the finest. They are such high quality individuals who have dedicated their lives to service, and those who have families, the same thing. And it showed me, it broadened my perspective and gave me an opportunity to step outside of the fishbowl of my environment and see the world differently for the first time. And I miss the army. I miss aspects of the army. I have to say that on my path, though, I have outgrown it, and that's okay. I don't regret my decision. I'm grateful for my decision to be a soldier. It came at a cost. It came at a cost, and the cost of that can be itemized in another video. I'll probably talk about that. Well, either next or and later. Definitely, I will go over that. Um, but it was good for my mental health and development, and I'm a better man for having stepped in and slid those boots onto my feet and put on that uniform and stood on freedom's frontier and gone to war and engaged with the people that I engaged with and learned from them and developed from them. It's helped me to become a better man. And that's a fact. It's just a fact. The Army did a lot of good for me. So thank you for taking the time to spend with me and to listen in and take interest in my story. I hope that it was in the least entertaining and at the most informative, and as a bonus, maybe even insightful. So thank you very much, and I wish you a good day and take care.